My beloved child, pause here before you move any further, because what has found you in this moment is not ordinary. There is something waiting behind these words, something your heart has sensed for months but could never fully explain. Do not rush past this. Do not let the noise around you steal the message that has been trying to reach you through dreams, silence, memories, and sudden waves of emotion. What you are about to hear was meant to find you at the exact moment when you were finally strong enough to understand it. Your soulmate has been carrying a confession. Not for a few days. Not since yesterday. For months. They have rehearsed it when no one was listening. They have whispered pieces of it into empty rooms. They have formed the words while staring at your name, only to erase everything before courage could become action. Again and again, they have come close to telling you, and every time, something inside them has trembled. Not because the truth is small, but because once it is spoken, nothing between you can remain the same. Listen carefully, because heaven is not revealing this to make you chase, beg, or force what is not ready. This message is coming to prepare your spirit. There is a difference between being given a sign and being told to run ahead of divine timing. You are being shown what has been hidden so that when the moment arrives, you will recognize it. You will not mistake sincerity for confusion. You will not dismiss a trembling voice simply because it took too long to speak. You will understand that some truths require a person to lose every excuse before they finally become brave enough to say them. Your soulmate wants to tell you, I have been waiting months to tell you this, please listen. Those words are heavier than they appear. Behind them are nights of regret. Behind them are conversations they imagined having with you. Behind them are moments when they almost reached out but stopped because fear told them it was too late. Behind them is a private realization that has grown stronger with every passing week. They thought time would weaken what they felt. Instead, time made it clearer. They thought distance would silence the connection. Instead, the silence magnified everything they were trying not to hear. There was a moment, not long ago, when your soulmate realized that avoiding the truth had become more painful than speaking it. That was the turning point. Something happened around them that forced them to look honestly at their own heart. It may have appeared ordinary from the outside, a question from someone close, an old song playing unexpectedly, a familiar place, a photograph, a dream, or the simple mention of your name, but inside them, it opened a door they had spent months keeping closed. Suddenly, every feeling they had buried stood before them at once. The tenderness. The regret. The longing. The fear of losing you. The realization that no one else had reached the same hidden place within them that you reached without even trying. They could no longer pretend that you were just a passing thought. You had become the conversation inside their silence. Even when they were smiling around others, part of them was wondering what you were doing. Even when they appeared distracted by life, part of them was returning to a memory of you. Even when they convinced themselves to move forward, something kept pulling them back, not into obsession, but into recognition. There was a truth in your connection they could not replace. There was a peace in your presence they had not found elsewhere. There was something about you that made them feel seen, and that feeling frightened them because being truly seen meant they could no longer hide from themselves. My child, you must understand this, your soulmate did not remain silent because they felt nothing. They remained silent because they felt more than they knew how to carry. Some people speak quickly when emotion comes. Others become quiet because the emotion is so deep that language feels inadequate. Your soulmate has been standing in that second place. Their silence was not empty. It was crowded with words. It was filled with unsent messages, unfinished explanations, private apologies, and one confession they have returned to more times than they could count. There is something they want you to know about the months behind you. They were watching the distance grow, and every time they noticed it, they told themselves they still had time. They thought there would be another chance, another opening, another easy moment when the words would come naturally. But divine timing began pressing upon their spirit. What once felt like someday began to feel urgent. What once felt safe to postpone began to feel dangerous to keep hidden. Not dangerous in a fearful way, but dangerous to the future they secretly still hoped could exist with you. They began to realize that silence can become a decision, even when no decision was intended. And that realization shook them. Your soulmate has been asking themselves questions they never wanted to face. What if you believe they never cared? What if you have mistaken their fear for indifference? What if you finally closed the door because they waited too long to knock? What if someone else gives you the honesty they kept withholding? What if they are forced to watch you become happy without them while carrying the knowledge that they never told you the full truth? These questions have followed them. But there is one question that pierced deeper than all the others. What if the person I was meant to be honest with walks away believing a lie about my heart? That is why this confession is rising now. Heaven has been working in the hidden places, not controlling anyone, not forcing a heart, but revealing what avoidance can no longer conceal. Your soulmate is being confronted with the cost of staying guarded. They are learning that love cannot always survive on unspoken understanding. They are learning that a connection can feel sacred and still require courage. They are learning that if they want to be known by you, they must finally allow themselves to be seen without the mask, without the perfect explanation, without the protection of emotional distance. And there is something else. They have been afraid you would not believe them. This fear is one of the deepest reasons they waited. They know their actions may not have matched the intensity of what they felt. They know there were moments when they appeared uncertain, distant, distracted, or even unaffected. They know you may have spent nights questioning whether the connection mattered to them at all. They know their silence created stories in your mind that they never intended to create. Now they are wondering whether words can repair what silence damaged. They are not only preparing to confess how they feel. They are preparing to explain why they hid it. That explanation is where the true revelation begins. There is a wound your soulmate has rarely spoken about. It taught them that vulnerability can be used against them. It taught them to measure every word, conceal every weakness, and leave first before they could be left. They carried that lesson into your connection without realizing how deeply it controlled them. When they felt something real with you, instead of moving closer, the old wound told them to protect themselves. Instead of saying, "This matters to me," they became harder to read. Instead of admitting, "I am afraid to lose you," they created distance. Instead of giving you clarity, They waited for you to somehow understand what they were too afraid to express. But you could not read every hidden chapter. You felt the connection, yes. You noticed the moments when their eyes said more than their mouth. You sensed the emotional current beneath ordinary conversations. You felt when they were pulling away while still hoping you would remain. Yet you were never meant to carry the entire connection alone. You were never meant to translate endless silence. You were never meant to prove your worth by waiting without truth. Heaven saw the questions you carried quietly. You wondered whether you imagined the depth of it. You wondered whether you had mistaken potential for promise. You wondered why someone who seemed to feel so much could say so little. You wondered whether the tenderness you experienced was real or whether your own heart had simply filled in the blanks. My child, not everything you sensed was imagination. But not everything you hoped for was ready. That distinction matters. The connection was real, but the readiness was incomplete. The feeling was present, but the courage was still forming. The bond awakened something in both of you, yet awakening and action do not always arrive on the same day. You became aware of the connection before your soulmate became capable of honoring it openly. That delay caused pain, but it also forced growth that neither of you could avoid. During these months, you were being taught not to abandon yourself while loving another person. Your soulmate was being taught that love without honesty becomes a room with no doors. You were learning boundaries. They were learning bravery. You were learning that your intuition deserves respect. They were learning that emotion requires responsibility. You were learning to stop begging for clarity. They were learning that clarity must be offered before the opportunity disappears. And now, those lessons are approaching each other. This is why the energy feels different. You may have noticed it without knowing why. A sudden sense that something is shifting. Memories returning with unusual vividness. Dreams that feel more emotional than ordinary dreams. A strange calm after a long period of confusion. Moments when you feel as though someone is about to speak your name. Times when your heart feels both heavy and hopeful without any visible reason. Do not build your life around signs, but do not ignore the wisdom your healing has given you. Sometimes the heart senses movement before the eyes witness it. Sometimes inner peace arrives before outer confirmation. Sometimes a chapter begins changing in silence before a single visible page has turned. Your soulmate is reaching the end of their silence. But before they speak, they are confronting one final fear. They are afraid the truth will expose how deeply they have been affected by you. They have tried to appear composed. They have tried to tell themselves that they were in control. They have tried to reduce the connection to something manageable, something logical, something they could place neatly in the past. But the truth refuses to fit inside that smaller story. You changed something in them. Not by demanding change, not by forcing closeness, but by awakening a part of their heart they thought had become unreachable. You reminded them what emotional safety could feel like. You made them imagine a future they had stopped believing in. You reflected back a version of themselves that was softer, more honest, and more alive. And that frightened them because once a person sees who they could become, returning to emotional numbness becomes much harder. Their confession is not only about missing you. It is about what meeting you revealed within them. They want to tell you that your presence entered their life during a time when they were pretending to be stronger than they felt. They want to tell you that something about your energy made them lower their guard, even when they fought to raise it again. They want to tell you that they remembered small things you said. They want to tell you that your voice stayed with them after conversations ended. They want to tell you that your absence affected rooms you had never entered. They want to tell you that there were moments when they almost admitted everything. One of those moments still haunts them. It was a moment when you gave them an opening, perhaps through a question, a look, a message, or a silence that invited honesty. They felt the confession rise. Their heart began pounding. The words came close. But fear interrupted. They changed the subject, delayed the response, gave you less than the truth, or acted as though the moment meant nothing. Afterward, they replayed it again and again. They wondered what would have happened if they had simply been brave. That missed moment became a private symbol of everything they had delayed. It reminded them that opportunities do not always announce when they are the last of their kind. It reminded them that people can grow tired of waiting for what was never clearly promised. It reminded them that love may be patient, but self-respect eventually asks for truth. This realization has matured them. They are no longer only asking, "What do I feel?" They are asking, "What am I willing to do about what I feel?" That is a much more powerful question. Feelings can remain hidden for years. Intentions can exist without change. But love becomes real in the visible world through honesty, consistency, accountability, and action. Your soulmate is beginning to understand this. The confession they have been preparing is not supposed to be a beautiful speech with no future behind it. Deep within, they know that words alone will not be enough. They know they must be ready to answer the questions their silence created. Why did you wait? Why did you pull away? Why did you let me believe I did not matter? Why now? And most importantly, what has truly changed? They have been preparing for these questions, even if they do not yet know every answer. Some of their answers will surprise you. The deepest one is this. They believed they had to become completely certain before speaking, but now they understand that certainty does not mean the absence of fear. It means choosing truth while fear is still present. They waited for a day when vulnerability would feel easy. That day never came. Instead, they reached a point where remaining silent became harder than risking honesty. That is where they are now. Standing between the old version of themselves and the truth they can no longer deny. There is a conversation forming. Not fantasy. Not a promise that you should put your life on hold. A possibility gathering around courage, timing, and emotional readiness. Heaven is asking you to remain grounded as it unfolds. Do not abandon your peace to anticipate every detail. Do not rehearse your response to words you have not yet heard. Do not reopen doors that have not been approached with respect. Let truth arrive as truth, not as projection. You are not being prepared to surrender your standards. You are being prepared to hear without losing yourself. This is important because when your soulmate finally speaks, the emotion may be intense. Their voice may carry the weight of everything they postponed. They may tell you things that confirm what your heart once suspected. They may reveal that they watched from a distance, struggled with jealousy, regretted certain choices, or feared that someone else had taken their place. They may admit that they tried to move on emotionally and discovered that avoidance is not healing. But you must listen for more than passion. Listen for responsibility. Listen for growth. Listen for the difference between someone who misses your presence and someone who is prepared to honor it. Heaven does not want you hypnotized by beautiful words. Heaven wants you aligned with truth. Your heart is precious. It should not be opened merely because someone finally expresses emotion. It should be opened where emotion is joined by maturity, where longing is joined by consistency, and where regret is joined by change. Your soulmate senses this. They know you are not the same person you were months ago. They know the version of you who once waited anxiously has grown quieter, wiser, and harder to confuse. They feel that your energy no longer chases explanations. They sense that you have begun choosing peace over uncertainty. This change in you has made the truth more urgent within them, because they realize your healing may lead you somewhere their silence cannot follow. They are afraid of arriving after your heart has already closed. Yet there is something they do not know. Your heart has not become cold. It has become discerning. You still carry tenderness, but you no longer wish to pour it into spaces that refuse to hold it carefully. You still believe in deep connection, but you are learning that a sacred bond should not require you to betray your own dignity. You still feel, but you no longer confuse emotional intensity with divine instruction. This is your strength now. And it is precisely this strength that will allow you to hear their confession clearly. There is one line your soulmate has been repeating privately. One sentence they have tried to perfect because it contains the truth they are most afraid to say. They believe everything depends on whether you understand this one thing. It is the reason they waited, the reason they withdrew, and the reason they are now preparing to break the silence. But before that sentence can be spoken, another revelation must come first. Your soulmate recently discovered something about you. Something they did not expect. It changed the way they understood the months of distance. It made them question an assumption they had been holding about your heart. For a long time, they believed you had moved on emotionally, forgotten them, or decided the connection never mattered. That belief became one of the excuses they used to remain silent. They told themselves there was no reason to speak if your heart was already elsewhere. Then something happened. A detail reached them. A truth surfaced. Perhaps through a conversation, a memory, something they saw, or the realization of what your silence actually meant. They began to understand that your distance was not indifference. It was protection. You did not become quiet because you stopped caring. You became quiet because caring without clarity was hurting you. When they understood this, everything changed. They saw the past differently. They remembered moments when you were not rejecting them, you were waiting for them to meet you honestly. They remembered the questions hidden beneath your words. They remembered how often you gave them room to be sincere without forcing them. And then the regret became unbearable. Because they realized you had not been asking for perfection. You had only been asking for truth. My child, this is the confession beneath the confession. Your soulmate is not simply preparing to say, "I missed you." They are preparing to admit, "I misunderstood your silence, and because I misunderstood it, I almost lost the person I was trying not to need." That admission is difficult for them. It requires humility. It requires them to accept that fear distorted what they saw. It requires them to admit that they projected their own insecurity onto you. It requires them to face the fact that they may have wounded the very person they wanted most deeply to protect. And yet, even this is not the final revelation. There is another reason they have been waiting months. A reason connected to a promise they made privately. At some point during the silence, your soulmate told themselves they would not come forward until they could offer you something different from what they offered before. They did not want to return with the same confusion, the same mixed signals, or the same fear disguised as distance. They wanted to become certain that when they spoke, they could stand behind their words. For months, they have been trying to change quietly. Not perfectly. Not without setbacks. But summit.